Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, I was going to go through this article with you all, but instead of doing that, I don't think that this article does this interview justice. Who you're looking at here is Dr. Charles Nenner. He's a medical doctor. However, he specializes in cycles, in major cycles throughout history. And there is so much that he has to talk about in this interview that he did with Mr. Hunter, Greg Hunter, who's on Rumble. I'm going to leave a link to this article on a pinned comment. And if you go to this article, here is the video. If you want to watch it here, if you don't have a Rumble account, or you can go to Rumble and go to Greg Hunter's or USA Watchdog and watch the interview. Now, before I start going over the notes, I actually watched this like 3 times already and took a whole bunch of notes. You can literally watch this interview 3 times over and always catch something different every time you watch it, because there's so much information. And let me go ahead and plug this in there. This is not going to be a happy-go-lucky video, right? What I'm actually going to be talking to you all about, because I took a lot of notes. That way we can take a look at those things that Mr. Nenner is predicting through his cycles work. And let me tell you that I've been following Mr. Nenner for a while now. And he has been extremely accurate throughout the years. Extremely. It's because of Mr. Nenner that I got out of my cryptos when I did. I didn't hit the top of the market, but I didn't care about that. It's because of him. And the things that he is telling us now that are coming in the near future and in the long term, it's something that I think we ought to pay attention to and absolutely act upon if you validate it for yourself and want to make that your reality, because really, we all live in our own reality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the points that I took off of this interview and go over them with you. And like I said, if you're here for a good time, if you're here to see something that's going to make you happy, that's not what this video is, ladies and gentlemen. This here is reality. I trust this gentleman. I think that what he's doing is telling the truth. He's not political in any way. And a lot of the things that he says through his cycle work matches a lot with other people that do cycle work and with other economists like Jim Rickards and like Martin Armstrong, who use totally different ideologies and they use totally different methods than what this gentleman uses. So I noticed that a lot of the things that he's predicting are matching the predictions from other people that use different methods than what he himself uses. And one of the things that I like about him and the other gentlemen that I mentioned, like Mr. Rickards and Mr. Armstrong, is that they're not really political. They just let the work do the talking. All right, so let's go ahead and start going over some of these notes. So he says that we are entering into a major war cycle. He says that there's 2 types of war cycles, and that there's small war cycles and major war cycles. And he said that this war cycle that we're entering into, that if it does manifest into a major war, like a world war.
Well, tell me what your timeline is on when it's going to start and how big are the casualties going to be?
About 1/3 of the population is not going to survive in this world.
So he expects about 1/3 of the population on Earth to die off if we enter into a major war cycle, meaning a world war. The timeline for when war will start, he says, short term, this summer, we are going to have a respite and things are going to be pretty, settled. But he says that starting next year, starting winter through to next year, that it's going to get pretty hot, that things are going to amplify. So that's something that we want to look out for. And what we'll do is I'll go ahead and revisit this video here probably next year sometime and see if any of these things have manifested into reality. All right, so he says that this year we're going to have a respite during the summer, but that starting winter and into next year, that the war cycle will pick up and get into full steam. And I honestly hope that he's 100% wrong. But like I said, he's been very accurate about many of the things that he's talked about, if not most. He says that we are also entering into a period of social unrest and that the cycle is just beginning and that people will actually have to protect their property because that's how bad it's going to get.
Talk about the civil unrest you see coming in America. Is it going to calm down or is it going to intensify?
No, years ago we talked about the 60 year in social unrest, and it says, well, we had the 60s, and now 60 years later we have the 20s, and it's only starting.
He also says that a lot of the, and remember, this is not political, but he's just a psychoanalyst. He says that a lot of the problems that the United States is going to have with social unrest has to do with the southern border being left wide open. He continues to say, expect an upturn in the market for the next 5 to 6 weeks. Then it will get worse. So the market's going to have what is called a dead cat bounce. Then it's going to get a lot worse. So the next 5 to 6 weeks, he says, he actually said in here, if you're in the market, this next upturn that we have, that we're going to have a little bit of an upturn, to get your stuff, to get your money out of the market, because after that, it's just going to be continually worse for years. Not for 1 year, not for 2, but for years. All right. He says that the Dow, this next major downturn, will go down all the way to 15,000. Then it'll have another little upturn, and then it'll go down to as much as 5,000 Dow. And that's a number that I've heard very often, and it makes a lot of sense. And let me take a quick minute to tell you why it makes a lot of sense that the Dow can hit 5. I'm thinking more like 6 or 7,000. But let me take a quick second to show you why. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so take a look at this. Remember 2008? Before 2008, there wasn't any quantitative easing, meaning that the federal government / the Federal Reserve wasn't just printing money out of thin air and bailing out banks, right? That started in 2009. That's when it really started. That they started doing that stuff, bailing out banks and all that kind of stuff, right? Quantitative easing, QE. All right. So if you take a look right here, this is March of 2009. It was the bottom of the market, right? It was the bottom of the market, March 2009. And then they started doing quantitative easing, and look at how it's taken us. Look at this. Let's go from March 2009 all the way to the top. It took us 424% in the last 13 years or so. Okay, but this is the key. This is when they started doing quantitative easing back in March of 2009, or we can just say 2009. All right, and now look at what the market was at. Look at what the Dow was at back then, 6,882 points. That tells me that all of that money that they printed represents about 25,000 or so points in the Dow. Because ask yourselves, how much better is your standard of living today than what it was back in 2009? All right, if you're old like I am, right? How much better is your standard of living today than it was back in 2009? I would say that is about the same. It's a little bit better, just a tiny bit better, but about the same. And that goes to talk about the wealth of the country. You know, if our standard of living in the last 13 years would have risen as much as the Dow would have risen, in my opinion, it's because we have a lot more wealth to show for it. But instead, what we have is we have inflated markets and we have bubbles everywhere. So when the government is no longer able to print all the money that it wants to and have that money have value because we have such high inflation, then our standard of living is going to go even lower than what it was back in 2008. But more so, the Dow, in my opinion, can very easily drop back to where it was in 2008, which was about 6,800, let's say 7,000. That's where I get my reasoning, that I believe that what Mr. Nenner is saying, or Dr. Nenner is saying, that it can go all the way down to 5,000.
So you're saying it's going to bounce this market for 4 or 5 weeks.
Right.
And then it tanks. How low does it? You've said this before, and people are dumbfounded by it. You're clocking a 5,000 Dow, is what you're saying. And
yes.
so, but tell me how bad in 4 or 5 weeks it's going to tank. How bad is it going to get? And explain how that's going to work in 4 or 5 weeks.
Well, I think we can go down to 15,000 because before we have another jump. But this long-term cycle is down for 2 years at least. So every bounce is just based on short covering, what they call the bear market rally. and this thing is not over yet. And I just, again, if I repeat, I wonder how people can advise to buy stocks when inflation is going very high and the GDP is going down and the world is going under. I find it amazing, but I had the same thing with the bonds. You remember, I said, get out of bonds, get out of bonds. The inflation is not going to stay 1%. And, if it goes up, you never get your money back. So a lot of people lost a lot of money, and now it's too late to sell. And soon we have the same thing with the stocks also, too late to sell.
All right, continuing on. He says that unemployment is going to go up along with inflation, that inflation is not going to stop going up. He says that between this summer and the end of the year, inflation may level out a little bit. It may settle down a little bit, and people are going to think, hey, we're back to good times again. But then that eventually the government numbers, not the number that we think it is. Like right now, the government number for inflation, I think it's 8.3 or 8.4, something like that. But we know that in reality it's closer to 20%. But he says that starting next year, that the government is going to put out a CPI number of 12%.
Where do you think inflation is going?
I have to use the data of the government, and based on the data, I had the target already of 12.5%.
Wow, you think the government data will print 12.5%? The government data?
Yeah, I think so.
Holy cow! And where do you see it going after that? Are we going to get a hyperinflation?
Well, no, we're going to weaken a little bit for I think the rest of the year, and then we get again. The cycle is just bottoming. The cycle of interest rates and the cycle of inflation is up for the next 30 years. And we're going back at least to the situation of 1980.
So you know that if the government puts out a CPI number of 12%, that inflation is probably going to be closer to 30% for the average working man, working woman. Right? So he says that that's going to be stagflation. He says that oil is going to go to $150 a barrel. He says that first it'll hit 122 and then it may go down a little bit, but that eventually it's going to go to $150 a barrel, and that if we do enter into a war cycle, that it will eventually go up to 250 or higher per barrel. All right. He says that this inflation cycle is going to be going up for the next several decades. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has implications that we need to actually look at as preppers, as trying to be prepared for what's coming. Can you buy 30 years worth of food and put it away? Well, if you have enough room and if you have enough money, let's say you're a multi-millionaire and you have a big piece of property with a big warehouse that's temperature controlled, and you can go out and order, $3 or $4 million worth of nutrient survival, then you probably could put away enough food for the next 20, 30 years, right? But most people can't do that. So that in itself has implications on how we need to prepare as preppers, how we need to prepare for the future. I remember in the article or in the interview, he was talking about food prices are only going to continue to go up and up and up, at least for the next 10 years, if not more. Well, unless you can store food for at least the next 10 years, what I am doing and what I have been doing is protecting my purchasing power by, putting away some of my savings in real money, in gold and silver. Now, I'm not promoting it. I'm just telling you that's what I am doing, because you can't put away everything, and things will not disappear completely. Only because we have a crash doesn't mean that things are going to disappear. They're going to go away. Right? No, they'll still be around. There'll still be people that have those things. But at what cost? What will it cost you? Right? What will your labor be worth after several years, if not more than a decade, of very high inflation?
Could people kind of offset the blow by, buying cases of canned food and water and rice and...
Yeah, but how much can you buy if inflation goes up for the next 8, 7, 9, 10 years? So what can you do?
Well, preserve your capital, I guess.
Yeah, but you cannot store food for so long.
Yeah. And that costs a lot of money too. You're talking about 8, 9, 10 years of food.
Yeah.
He says that the housing market is going to pretty much collapse. He says that gold and silver will bottom this year and then will start to go up on an uptrend for at least the next 5 to 6 years, until 2027 or so. He said that it may go down a little bit, that gold and silver, they may go down a little bit and hit a bottom, but then the trend will be upward. He says that if the gold standard is reinstated, listen to this, and this matches with what a lot of other analysts have said. He says that if they decide to reinstall or reinstate the gold standard because they pretty much printed the dollar to oblivion, that gold will be priced at about $40,000 an ounce. And I know that's pretty hard for some people to believe. Some of you that just heard that probably laughed. But what if I were to tell you, let me see, 5 years ago in 2017, that Bitcoin was going to go up to $68,000 a coin when it was $500 or $600 a coin back in 2017. I told a lot of people that back in 2017 and they laughed. They laughed. Well, that's okay. The price of food will continue to go up throughout the entire world. And that the global warming cycle, listen to this, the global warming cycle is over this year. And next year, we, and as in we, I mean the world, will have problem with crops because we have not prepared for a cooling earth. We've just been messing around, with this warming earth. And it's all a cycle, ladies and gentlemen. It has to do with that big yellow or big bright star that we see every day. He says that this health crisis cycle is over. So if you take a look back at, I think it was 1918 that we had a worldwide health crisis. He says this health crisis is over. The cycle is over. He says that governments may continue to talk about it and keep propping it up for political reasons, but that it's over. And again, he reiterates that the next bounce in the stock market, that people that are vested in it should get their stuff out of there, because that's going to be the last bounce until we start going on a downward trend pretty much permanently until it reaches 15,000 and then eventually 5,000. So ladies and gentlemen, take this as you will. I recommend that you go and take a look at this video. It's about 41 minutes long, something like that. But I'll tell you what, well worth it. Very well worth it. There's a lot in here to digest. Like I said, I watched the video 3 times and it was well worth it watching it 3 times. So having said that, I hope you get something out of this. What's the moral of the story? Get prepared. Get prepared the very best that you can, all right? One of the things that I'm going to continue to do, and I'm going to do it even more rapidly than what I was doing it before, is I'm going to continue to store a lot of freeze-dried foods. I'm going to continue to put away a lot of freeze-dried meats that I freeze-dry myself. Why? Because those foods have a 25-year shelf life, right? And probably more than that, but they'll keep their nutrients for 25 years if they're in the freeze-dried form. I'm going to continue to buy those foods because I'll tell you what, freeze-dried foods and freeze-dried food companies, in my opinion, they are going to have a very, very difficult time keeping up with inflation, just like we are, and even more so, getting their ingredients supplied so that they can put out a product. I see a lot of these companies stopping production altogether. I have no idea if that's going to happen with nutrient survival. I have no idea at all. But I see prices by the end of this year going up 20-30%, if not more, for everyone, not just nutrient survival. And I'm not making any statements. I have no idea whether they're going to bring their prices up or not, but that's just a prediction that I have. Every one of these long-term food storage companies, they will be ramping up their prices big time. So I would say that if I have a few extra dollars today, I'm going to spend it on a few different things if I can. Preserve my wealth with gold and silver, all right, number 1. And this is in not priority order, not in any particular order. Number 2, continue to stock up on foods that will last a very long time, 20, 25 years, only if I already have a full pantry with a year's worth of food that I eat every day, which I do. So continue to stock up on freeze-dried foods, continue to put away rice and beans and dried goods that will last at least 25 years. And also, remember what he said about that people will have to protect their homes because of social unrest. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I truly do hope that you got something out of this. Like I said, it wasn't going to be a happy-go-lucky type of a video, but these are the things that we do need to hear. We need to hear these things. And I would hope that you would all go and check out that video and spend the 40 minutes or so, checking that video out. There's one thing that you can do, and there's something that I do whenever I'm reviewing my own videos, and is that I put the speed of the video on YouTube, and you can also do it on Rumble. I put the speed up to like 1.5, or even sometimes 2. I tend to talk a little bit slower than most people, at least when I listen to myself. So whenever I put my speed and I'm rewatching a YouTube video that I put out, I'll put it on like 1.5, and it sounds, you can still listen to what the person is saying, and it goes by a lot quicker. So you may want to try that. All right. Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you tomorrow, Friday at 2 p.m. Alaska time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And remember that tomorrow we will be announcing the winner, or picking the winner randomly, of the Opus solar generator, the Opus 1200, for one of the Alaska residents that entered to win. So if you live in Alaska, or you can get to Fairbanks within the next 30 days after tomorrow, go ahead and leave a comment. Just go watch that video and leave a comment. There's some very basic instructions. It doesn't cost you anything to enter. So if you live here in Alaska and you can get to Fairbanks within the next 30 days after we announce the winner tomorrow, go ahead and enter. And good luck. I hope that a lot of people enter, because actually the odds are very, very good. I think last time I checked, there were like 32 or 33 entries of people that lived in and around the Fairbanks area. God bless every one of you. Have a great day.